All right, ready to dive in? We're tackling transcranial magnetic stimulation today, TMS, for
Hmm.
those in the know. You sent over some seriously cool research on it,
Oh, absolutely.
specifically how TMS actually works on the brain, like down at the cellular level.
Yeah,
It's wild. But, gotta admit, this paper's a tough read.
it's dense.
Good thing we're breaking it down together.
Definitely.
So, first off, TMS doesn't directly act as with brain cells. Kind of blew my mind. I always thought, zap, neurons firing, but not so much.
It's way more interesting than that. Think of it like dropping something, a pebble, into a pond. See the ripples? That's kind of like the electric current spreading from the magnetic pulse. It's those ripples, that current, that actually gets those neurons going.
Okay, that's way cooler than my zap idea. But it gets even wilder, right? Because the paper talks about how TMS specifically goes for the axons of neurons, those long arm-like parts.
Exactly, yeah. Like electrical cables carrying signals all over your brain. And those cables, they're way more sensitive to that electrical current from TMS compared to the main body of the neuron.
So it's not just a and one part of the neuron, it's like hitting those info highways.
Exactly. It's all about their shape and how fast they react to electrical signals makes them the prime target. And that's huge for researchers, that level of specificity.
Wow, this is already mind-blowing. We're just getting started. Okay, so then the paper gets really specific, talking about axon terminals, bends in the axon, something called the axon hillock. What even are those, and why do they matter?
Well, it's all about pinpointing that stimulation, right? So the axon terminals, those are the points where one neuron actually connects, talks to another, and the axon hillock, that controls the signal starting. So those spots and the bends, they're extra sensitive to TMS, which means
Researchers can be really precise with how they're messing with our brains.
precisely incredible control.
Amazing. Okay, but there's got to be a catch, right?
Oh,
Because I was reading about how TMS can stimulate other nerves, not just the ones in the brain.
right, right. It's true. As amazing as TMS is, those magnetic pulses, they can also set off nerves in your scalp, your muscles. That's why people hear clicks or might feel a tapping during TMS.
Makes sense. So how do they make sure they're seeing the brain effects, not just all that other stuff?
Ah, that is the million-dollar question and a huge challenge in TMS research. It takes some seriously careful planning and then really digging into the data. Scientists use things like control conditions so they can compare brain activity with and without TMS, and that coil placement. Super precise, targeting very specific brain regions. Plus, they've got these high-tech ways to filter the data, get rid of the noise from those other stimulated nerves.
Like noise-canceling headphones, but for brain signals.
Kind of. One technique they use is called ICA, independent component analysis. It's a bit complicated, but basically it helps separate the brain activity that's related to TMS from other signals, muscle twitches, eye blinks, things like that, all based on their unique characteristics.
So it's sifting out the good stuff.
Exactly. Pretty incredible the lengths they go to.
It's amazing what they can do these days.
Really makes you appreciate the complexity of the brain.
Yeah, and speaking of complexity, the motor cortex, the part that controls movement, seems to be a rock star in the TMS world.
It is. It's a gold mine for research because we can actually measure what it does. Movement gives us a clear picture of how TMS is actually affecting things.
Makes sense. So what's the deal with TMS and the motor cortex? It's not as simple as, like, sending a signal straight to a muscle.
Yeah, I got it. It's not like TMS tells your bicep to flex. Think of it more like it's starting a chain reaction. TMS hits the motor cortex, activates a group of neurons, which then trigger another group, and so on, until finally the message gets all the way to the spinal cord, which then tells the muscle to move.
Whoa, so many steps between the magnetic pulse
Yeah.
and actually moving. How do they even track all of that? The paper mentioned something about I waves.
Oh, yeah, I waves, indirect waves. They're these bursts of electrical activity, and they shoot down the spinal cord after the motor cortex gets zapped with TMS. Researchers can actually measure those I waves, which is incredible because it's like,
A window into that whole brain-to-muscle communication highway.
exactly, each I wave is like a checkpoint along the way, showing another stage in the signal's journey, and researchers can map out every step with incredible detail.
That's mind-blowing. Okay, so it's not just where they put that TMS coil, but also which way it's pointing, am I right? Like, the direction of the magnetic field matters.
You're on top of it. It's called directional sensitivity, and it's huge in TMS. Different parts of the motor cortex respond differently depending on which way a current's flowing. Like, imagine shining a flashlight on something textured, change the angle, different parts stand out.
Okay, yeah, I see it. So by fine-tuning that magnetic pulse, they can be super specific about which neurons they're stimulating, which then affects, like, the whole chain reaction after that.
Precisely. It's all about control, and that's crucial both for research and for, down the line, maybe using TMS to treat things.
That's remarkable.
Mm.
Okay, last thing from the paper that blew my mind, hot spots
Yeah.
in the motor cortex.
Yes, the hot spots. These are the areas that are like extra sensitive to TMS. Think of it like, you know how some spots on your back are more ticklish? Same idea. Some areas just react more strongly, maybe because they've got more neurons packed in or a certain arrangement of neurons.
Makes sense. But everyone's brain is different, so wouldn't those high spots be different for everyone too?
Exactly. Your own personal brain anatomy, even your skull thickness, it all plays a role. And that's what makes TMS so powerful. You can look at general brain function, but also really zoom in on what makes each person's brain unique.
It's amazing, isn't it, how this magnetic pulse can uncover so much about how our brains work. But this paper, it goes even further, right? We're not just talking about single neurons anymore, or even just the motor cortex.
It's about the whole shebang. The brain is this massive interconnected network.
Exactly. So how does TMS fit into that?
Think of the brain like, I don't know, busy city, right? Different areas with their own specialties, language, memory, making decisions.
Okay, I like.
And just like a city needs what? Roads, buses, trains to connect everything. The brain has its own intricate pathways of communication.
So TMS is like revealing those pathways.
More like kickstarting them. See, TMS can actually trigger a cascade of activity across the brain. Like imagine setting off a line of dominoes. That first one falls and it ripples down the line.
Okay, I can see it. But how do researchers actually track those connections? The brain's a pretty complicated place.
Oh, they've got tricks. One thing they do is combine TMS with other brain imaging, like EEG, that's for measuring electrical activity, or fMRI, which looks at blood flow changes, seeing where the brain's working hard. So they combine those, and suddenly...
They can see which parts of the brain light up because of TMS, even if it wasn't directly zapped.
Exactly. It's like piecing together a conversation, seeing who's talking to who.
And then there's dual-site TMS, which sounds seriously high-tech.
It's pretty cool. They use 2 TMS coils, so they can stimulate 2 different brain areas at the same time, or one after another.
And that lets them, directly study how those 2 areas are connected.
Exactly, like actually eavesdropping on the brain's dialogue.
Incredible. Although the paper did mention this studying other areas with TMS, it's not as straightforward as the motor cortex. Why is that?
Well, think about it. The motor cortex, it's got a clear output, right? Movement, easy to measure. But other areas like language processing, memory, emotions...
It's not as obvious what's happening.
Exactly.
Right.
It's like trying to solve a puzzle, but you don't have all the pieces.
Or you don't even know what the picture is supposed to be.
That too. But even with those challenges, researchers are getting better, finding new ways to use TMS to study those complex functions.
It's like a whole new world opening up right inside our heads.
And we're just starting to explore it.
Well, on that note, any final thoughts for our listeners as we wrap up this deep dive?
I think the big takeaway here is TMS is powerful, it's precise, and it's giving us a whole new understanding of the brain at a level we never thought possible. What we talked about today, axons, eye waves, hotspots, brain networks.
It's just the beginning.
Exactly, the future of TMS. It's going to be incredible.
I can't wait to see what they discover next. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time.